So we want to talk to you about this Iranian cyber response stuff. Did you get a chance to review all the documentation?
Yeah. Talk about a interesting week, huh? Week and a half, 2 weeks. All the different things that are going on. Um, the very interesting what they put together, and obviously, I don't know whether it was something they had in their back pocket ready to go beforehand, or somebody wrote something pretty quick. What I feel with the document is, first of all, that it's fantastic that they put it together, but honestly, this is something that I think people should be reading just in general. It's yes, it's a in response to the escalation of what's going on in the Middle East these days, but it's really just common practice that we should all be taking when it comes to protecting just regular internet connection stuff.
I mean, that was my initial reaction when I read through was that this should be common practice.
Uh, well, credential stuffing is an ongoing attack that we're seeing all over these days. There are so many, we've got billions of usernames and passwords, upwards of 10 or 12 billion right now that are floating around the internet. Probably we'll see, 20 or 30 billion usernames and passwords floating around the internet in the next couple of years. And really what credential stuffing is been a problem is now it's so easy to go grab these and just constantly hit a web application. Typically, the Verizon data breach report 2017 said like 9 in 10 requests to a login page are going to be are a bot, really just trying usernames and passwords. They don't necessarily go really fast. The old days we would have used Hydra or something like that, but now they're nice and slow. Maybe a few requests from an IP address, over the course of a few minutes, and then that IP address is never used again. What we found in the financial services organizations that I've been dealing with over the last few months is they're seeing a single request from an IP address, so they never see that IP address again. It's so easy to just hop on, hide behind some sort of proxy and be able to fire a request in. So we really want to be able to build some sort of protection that understands that vector and is not just basic IP based. Sure, IP is important because maybe it's going to be a proxy, or maybe it's going to be an IP address that maybe as the customer have not ever seen before, but maybe it's been flagged as a bad IP because it's been tried a credential stuffing attack somewhere else to somebody different. But for the most part, we do want to understand the client that's coming in. So we want to understand that probably that little JavaScript app, or maybe that Python script, or whatever it happens to be that's coming in and hitting us. So we want to understand what that particular client is, and be able to then say, hey, we've seen this client before, and we want to stop that client, even if its IP changes. And we want to be able to add on a multi-factor component to that as well. That really helps us with the credential stuffing. There's so many ways to turn on multi-factor authentication. There's lots of tools out there, some of which are even free. So if you are an end user, and a company is offering multi-factor, or even social-based off multi-factor, those are things where you probably want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that as a consumer, and then as a if you're the one managing the web application, you want to make sure that those are things that you're offering as well. So things like OAuth and social logins, I think, is going to be a great protection for credential stuffing, just without having to even turn on a bot protection or a fraud protection. Which, again, there are lots of options then too, where we can provide web app firewall protection, with our with F5's advanced WAF. We have the ability to protect against a bot and understand what a bot looks like without even having to understand what the bot is doing or what the application's doing. We can actually sense that, hey, this is not a browser talking to us because the request doesn't look like a browser. So
So
Those are
I bought
definitely
my
things that are
credentials
very
back off
stuffing.
the dark web, so I'm safe now, right?
Yeah.
It only cost me $12. I mean, I got a couple 100,000 other people too, but
Right,
now
right.
now I'm safe, right?
Right. Well, because you bought it and nobody
Yeah,
else can have it once you buy it, right? So
right.
it's yeah,
I
yeah,
bought it back.
right,
That's what they told me.
right, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, so you're the security SME here. What else should we look at? Now, I do have some notes that aren't listed here that you've hit on a little bit that I think are also important. One thing that I never see in a lot of these documents is anything that covers bots, and I don't see anything that covers DOS. And in situations where we're providing support to warfighters and to government employees that run our government, they're not looking at things that protect them against, normally with a DOS attack, it's, hey, look over here. While I'm going in this way to attack your system, but we never have anything baked into any of these. Like, there's nothing here that says protect against DOS, protect against bots. So maybe that's something you can kind of talk about too, and I'll kind of let you kind of take over.
Yeah, like so we have some honeypots that are running, and they are just IP addresses. They are just a spun up version of of an open source CMS. I mean, could be WordPress, could be something else, and there's nothing to them. They're an IP address. They don't even have a domain name. There's no reason for anybody to visit. Um, you know, but we still get traffic to it, right? And we get thousands of requests per month. Maybe 15, 20,000 IPs are being noted, or requests are being noted coming into those sites. And those are bots. Those are bots that are doing reconnaissance. So we want to be able to protect against those, because I met with a customer this week who actually was, the Iranian thing is front and center, because they actually were attacked and hacked by the Iranians earlier this year, or I guess 2019. So they had actually this week had met with DHS regarding this whole thing. And really what had happened is they determined that there was some reconnaissance. So there was some reconnaissance bots that figured out that they had some, they had some chinks in their armor. And they had a location where they could be exploited, and that's done by bots. So we want to be able to mitigate those by turning on some easy bot mitigation tools. And like I said earlier, just being able to sense that this is not a browser. Browsers act in certain ways, and we can see from that request, just the very first request, what headers are in there, how it connects. Even if it tries to do with an SSL connection, we could even do SSL fingerprinting to understand that is a device that we expect it to be. So we can say, okay, great, this is actually a bot coming to our site. We want to block this, or yes, this is a browser coming to us. We want to allow it in. But then once that's in, and we can still inspect that connection and understand what's going on, maybe with some JavaScript, maybe a little bit of fingerprinting of the browser canvas. Those are things that allow us to then further determine what the intent of that request is. And then what that does is it really reduces your attack surface. So in the case of the customer I was talking to, had they been able to stop those bots from sniffing and determining that they had some vulnerabilities on their web application, they might have been able to circumvent the eventual defacement attack that they experienced. So those are kind of things where we want to be able to put those protections in at the very beginning, because it stops the later attack and the broader attack down the road.
Cool.
Yeah, so Peter, I have a question. So I noticed a lot of these, advisories on here, they're talking about data in transit. And, I noticed that we have a lot of customers who aren't actually breaking open SSL. So, some of these had mentioned like looking for compressed files, obfuscation, that sort of thing. We'll talk a little bit about, encrypted transit and how to like look into that safely and what to do with that kind of stuff.
Well, encryption is awesome. I mean, it's what we need to do to be able to protect ourselves. But so yeah, encrypted threats. Yeah, encryption is awesome, right? It allows us to protect ourselves, allows us to do all our fantastic banking, and all the shopping we want to do. But from a hacker's perspective, it's even better because it allows them to just hide in the stream, right? So they're hiding in plain sight, essentially, right? So they're what we're finding is a phishing attack where somebody's going to try to use a use a link to get you to get to visit a site. That site's going to have some sort of compromised component on it. It injects some malware, and we're talking there's as little as like 90 bytes of traffic that needs to be sent down to the client for it to just to install itself, and then be able to pull down from a command and control location the actual malware, and that's where we're seeing those attacks. And we can have all the technology in place that you want to inspect the traffic, but if it's encrypted, those devices just aren't going to be able to do anything. You're going to have to deploy certificates. You're going to have to manage those devices. Typically, that it also impacts performance. So what we see with being able to do that as an offload, we call that SSL orchestration. So basically, we would build a bunch of services. So we have customers with dozen or more of these services, a DLP box, a forensic storage device, next gen firewalls, IPSs. There's a whole bunch of different things, so malware tools and the detonation technology that's out there, and basically we define all these different services, and then we can create service chains that line up these different devices based on where you're going, who you are, where it's coming from. There's a bunch of different ways we can do that, and even not decrypt as well. So if this is classified, like personal information, banking or tax related or something like that, we can bypass that. And really what we're doing there is we're minimizing the failure domain, we're minimizing the components that would be where malware can sit. And hopefully your bank is not going to have malware on it, and we're okay. But what we've actually seen, Microsoft released a report just before Christmas that the phishing technology, or the phishing, I don't even know, it's not a technology, but just the phishing market is getting very, very high tech. They're even looking for things where you go and get bob.com, and you have that for 2 years, but then you decide to never use that, and so you let that domain expire. Hackers are going and getting those domains the moment they're no longer there, no longer used. Go and get the certificate for it and using that as a phishing site. So a lot of tools will say, "Hey, I won't let you go to a site that just got turned on because that sounds fishy, right? With a PH or an F." Yeah. And what this does is it circumvents those normal protections. So a lot of the tools that are there to figure out where you're going and imply or infer that you're being hacked because you're going to a weird site, would say that, well, this is fine. The site's 15 years old because BillChurch.com, you've had that for 15 years, and you decide to no longer be Bill Church. I don't know.
I wish I had that thing. Somebody else has it.
And so when you let that expire, someone takes that and then turns that into a phishing site. So there are a lot of ways that phishing is a huge problem.
That's genius, actually. I mean, I hadn't considered that, but I do remember that being a metric that we would use, to determine, hey, is this site safe or not? Oh yeah, it's been around for 10 years, except it now belongs to somebody else.
Right. So those are things that are challenging, right? So just being able to sniff that traffic is the important component. And we've, as an industry, we've invested a lot of money into security inspection tools over the last 5-10 years, and encryption just has made that challenging to deploy. So being able to orchestrate that, be able to offload that SSL, as well as even maybe, a lot of these devices aren't even FIPS compliant. So that's going to be a huge component that we need to also address. So we can be FIPS compliant. We can integrate with an HMS or HSM if you want to offload your certificates to a storage environment. Secure vault. All those things are available by integrating, say an F5 appliance to do your SSL orchestration.
Yeah, I just saw, I read an article, I think it was during the holiday break, that a banking customer was spearphished somehow, and they used the MFA against him. So he got a phone call spoofed from the bank's phone number, where somebody said, "Hey, we've seen some suspicious activity on your account. We're going to send you a reset to your phone. Tell us the code that you receive." And they used that MFA to access his bank account. And they got to the point where they were asking him for his PIN number to his cards. So they were in there verifying. So they used his MFA to log in, and they were looking at his transactions saying, "Hey, was this you? Was this you? Can you confirm these transactions?" And they're like, "Okay, we're going to reset your PIN. What do you want it to be? Or what is your current PIN so we can reset it?"
To verify it, to make sure it's you.
And it's at that point when he finally realized, "Oh crap, maybe this is a phishing attack." And he just shared that out on Twitter recently, so it gets pretty crazy. Now I do have a question about, and I'm not going to say the vendor's name, but Iran hacked a semi-competitor in March, if you remember that, and stole terabytes of data, including credentials. And they can use that for things like password spraying. How could we protect against something like that? I mean, is there any way? I mean, that still falls into credential dumping, but they've got terabytes and terabytes of data that they took from this competitor. What can be done for things like that?
So at that point, what we want to be able to do is validate that when someone's logging in, they're not using a username and password that has been dumped. So we have the ability then to check against the database when the user logs in, and say, "Hey, you just logged in with Michael Coleman, foobar is your password, but Michael Coleman foobar is actually in a dumped database somewhere." We don't care that it's just Michael Coleman. Like that's interesting, but we want to make sure that the password matches as well. So we can validate against the database to say, "Oh, hang on, you're logging in with a known bad credential. What do we want to do at that point? Do we want to block you? Do we want to honeypot you?" We wanted to say, "Hey, you're welcome to come in, but you got to change your password." So actually, Microsoft has launched that as well on ADFS. So if you're a personal ADFS user, it's a regular Microsoft, they're forcing, if they find your username and password is in a credential a dump somewhere, they'll force you to change your username and password. If you're a corporate user, they'll notify your assigned admin. So it's part of their ATP solution. So we have the same kind of thing, but we can apply that to any kind of application opposed to just having to do it against your ADFS account. This actually would be, something you would turn on, and we validate that username and password against that database. It's instantaneous. There's like something called a Bloom filter that would exist on the box, and then we would validate that against the cloud database. It's all hashed. We're not checking the string version of the password. We're hashing the username and password against it, against that Bloom filter so it is still secure. But it means that we now can stop people from trying to log in. Now, I'm a perfect example of a person who had his Office 365 account attempt to be attacked several years ago. So probably 2014 or 2015. My username and password had been dumped in the LinkedIn breach, and so I shared a password between users. And my password was the same on LinkedIn as it was on Office 365, and someone tried to log into my account from South Africa, but Microsoft actually notified me saying, "Hey, someone's trying to log in. There's a weird place for you to log in from. Let's validate that you are who you say you are." And I got that notification on my phone and proceeded to panic and change my password. And when I looked, I realized that I'd actually visited Russia and Amsterdam and a bunch of other places.
Just forgot.
Trying to log in to my Office 365 account. So
congratulations, Pete. You played yourself.
yeah, I did. Yeah.
So that's funny because when I first heard we were doing that, I was very curious, like how are we storing that data and keeping it safe in the Bloom filter? So you don't know what a Bloom filter is, go check it out. It's actually pretty cool way to obfuscate data, but then check against it. So I wanted to say about that vendor that we're not going to talk about. What happened to that network was very similar to what happened to OPM probably 3 or 4 years before that, where they were going in and spraying known passwords, and this was against privileged systems, so probably the same. I would imagine the same sort of situation at that vendor. So it's funny. It's the old tricks are still good.
Yeah, you know what? Our F5 Labs team actually has a pretty cool slide that they had put together showing sort of a loop back of the attacks and when the vulnerability was sort of announced and when the attack happens. Yeah, literally everything is old. That's old is new again. The attacks, the F5 Labs team actually put together a really cool slide that shows like attacks versus when the vulnerability was announced. So we have attacks that are happening today where the vulnerability goes back to like 2003, 2005, right? It was announced then, for whatever reason, people are using systems that have a similar compromise in it, or the exact vulnerability, and that's actually what's happening. And people are coming in and attacking, those holes in the armor, and also too, the OPM attack, and this other attack we're talking about, or this other breach we're talking about. I mean, most of the attacks that happen, most of the breaches that happen, have some sort of compromised username and password involved in it, right? It's a default username and password that doesn't get changed, or it's a compromised username and password that is used. It could be a shared username and password. I mean, how many times we're at a customer site and the admins are all sitting in the room and they're all logging in with the same username and password.
Yeah.
Like that's a problem.
Get it from the Excel spreadsheet.
One thing I was thinking about when you were talking about hackers coming and buying up old domains once they're not used anymore, is one thing that I've noticed from as the cloud architect for federal, from my perspective, is every time I deploy one of these secure cloud architectures or talk to customers about things that they need to consider in these environments, is that if I deploy an application that may be public facing, whether it's in a commercial cloud or in a government cloud, within 24 hours, I can see potentially 80,000 pings, not specific pings, but whether it's a bot or it's a pen test overnight. And we've actually done that demo for a customer and said, okay, we're going to deploy this system fresh. We're going to come and look at the security logs the next day and see how much traffic we've seen overnight. And it's actually pretty ridiculous. And that's because it's not just the domains that are known by these systems. It's not actual people that are sitting there attacking. They just have scripts that go out and run Nmap or whatever on the internet, so they can have, they're war dialing the internet 24/7. So as soon as they see this IP come up, they know, okay, well, this is Microsoft's block, or this is AWS's block. So I'm going to start sending Linux injections, or I'm going to start sending RDP injection attacks to those different cloud vendors to see what I can get in, because somebody probably put a Windows box or a F5 device out there with the management, with a public IP on it, and I'm just going to jump in because they forgot to set or change a default password. So it's just, people need to start doing things a little bit better, or paying attention to, security policies and practices.
Well,
there's lots of ways that we can help in a lot of that.
Yeah, and one of the I think it's number 4 on the OWASP top 10, or number 4 or 5, security misconfiguration, right? And that's exactly it. Like, people just have not gone and done their due diligence to tweak this or tweak that, and things start to fall down. And that's where we see, you didn't turn the firewall on, or hey, the developer, and we're all developers, so we can malign ourselves. But how many times have we gone and deployed an application, pushed it out to test production, then out to production, and nobody's changed the users behind it, or nobody has set up particular ACLs for how it should be accessed. It's a constant problem, and no one takes the time to make those tweaks. And that's where, 6 months down the road, all of a sudden we got a breach in this application, and you've done everything you possibly thought you could have, but you had a wrong account, or you didn't set the ACLs up or something, because you're in a rush to get the thing out. You pushed it, and that's where the back door opens up for us.
Well, I think you've answered my questions, Pete. Bill, do you got anything else?
Once I find my mute button. No, I think that's pretty good for today. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. This was great.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, guys.